African American Male Achievement is an extraordinary strategy initiative for Oakland Unified School District that started about 8 years ago, back in fall of 2010, when then Superintendent Tony Smith actually looked at all of the academic data within Oakland Unified School District, both the positive data and the negative data. And what he began to identify is that African American male students were not achieving at levels that they should be. And as opposed to locating the problem with black children, really looked at the district as the problem, and kind of gave birth to the idea of creating an Office of African American Male Achievement, of which he brought me on as the founding director, really to kind of take this idea of how do we address the needs of African American male children and not locate the problem with the child, but really address the system, the structure, the culture, and the conditions that lead to the school to prison pipeline, and really flip that and reimagine a school system in service of African American male students. So we have been on that journey for the last 8 years through African American Male Achievement. And last year, the data had proved to be so positive in the spirit of the work we've been doing for African American Male Achievement that let's go ahead and begin to build out other strategies for our Latino student achievement and our Asian Pacific Islander student achievement. So last year is when we gave birth to the Office of Equity.
Our motto, our theme is engage, encourage, and empower. So at what point with African American Male Achievement, from the beginning when Dr. Tony Smith came in, he looked at the data and saw that there was a need to address the disparities that African American males was facing across all data points. Everything that was in the negative, African American males were first. Everything that was in the positive, African American males were second. Out of that, created a position in which he appointed Christopher P. Chapman to be executive director. At that point, Christopher P. Chapman created task force. There was other task force at that time. Myself, I was on the principal task force at that time for administrative evaluations, to do them in a different way. After the task force Mr. Chapman led was African American Male Task Force, got community members together from across the city, and one of their main points was to go interview, called a listening campaign, interview the Kings. And out of that interview, the Kings said there were three themes that consistently came up, and this is from kindergarten through 12th grade, even into college. That one, we need to talk about information that relates to us. Two, whenever we're around, we're always thought of in a deficit or as a suspect, so we're not really comfortable. And three, and most importantly, we need somebody to look like us to teach us, to work with us, to mentor us. And therefore, born out of that was the Manhood Development Program.
Latino student achievement is very important. So Latino students are now over 40% of OUSD students. Latino students are the largest ethnic minority now in OUSD, and it's time that the system galvanize community and come together as a system to understand how to better serve Latino students and families. So knowing that we are the largest ethnic group in OUSD, we also know that a majority of our third graders, close to 70% of our third graders, are not reading at grade level. And we know that if our students are not reading at grade level when they're in third grade, this has implications for them in the future. We also know that 1 in every 4 Latino kindergartner has not had access to preschool or early care. And we also know that that has implications for kindergarten readiness, for being able to read at grade level by third grade.
We just are finishing up our listening campaign. We really were just listening to what they had to say. What were some of their main struggles? What were some of their main issues and concerns? What was working in their schools? What's not working in their schools? We are looking at 3 ethnic populations that just don't have a lot of resources in Oakland. So one of them is our Polynesian students, have some of our most challenged and struggling kind of academic scores in terms of literacy, in terms of chronic absence, and in terms of graduation.
I have to go to work with my pops and miss school. And the reason why I feel that I relate to this is because usually, yet again, I go to work, I still got to miss out on school, and I get behind on work. I get behind in school too, and I got to miss out just to help out for the family and my parents and my financial needs.
There's also our Yemeni students who are coming in pretty high numbers and who don't have the infrastructure supports to help. So they're also facing very similar numbers in terms of literacy, in terms of reading and academics, math as well. And then we have our Southeast Asian students who, are Cambodian, Mien, Laotian, also were refugees, but they're kind of suffering the impacts of families who have been traumatized. So often officials will just look at these big categories of Asian. And in that Asian are about 45 different ethnicities. And so you have some high-performing Asian students and you have some low academic performing students. But because they're all clumped together, you can't see who's struggling. And so the importance of our initiative really being able to help work with our research assessment and data division and actually really disaggregate the data and be able to ask the right inquiries.
Our focus is culturally relevant, trauma-informed, gender-based services. So we get them in circle and we really deal with that trauma. Once you deal with that, then you can start talking about academic engagement. And so what does that look like? And so our first step is to engage them around the trauma that they're experiencing, but to do that through a cultural lens. One size does not fit all. And there are ways that we understand trauma through the culture that we experience. So how do we help them navigate that trauma and get the right services and support? Once you do that with children, you build up trust. Then they're going to let you in. Then you can engage them around work.
I'm excited, right? Like we have some intentionality around letting our young women see themselves in a academic space of excellence, to know that this is for them, to know that they're welcomed in these spaces so that they can get a vision for their lives.
No parent wants to come to school every time to say what's wrong with their kid. There's got to be other reasons. How about what's right with their kid? Let's make the glass half full and not always half empty. And so we have to treat the whole child, not half the child. And so our 3-pronged focus is let's deal with the trauma. Let's then move to academic engagement. At the same time, let's deal with the household of the child, and let's invite parents and community as part of the process.
Currently today, we're at 6 high schools, 6 middle schools, 2 alternative schools, and now I'm very proud to say 5 elementary schools. We now have our own curriculum called the Kepler curriculum, which means transformation of men to boys. In the high school level, it's A through G credited. The class is called Mastering Our Cultural Identity. You get G elective credit through UC system. Our facilitators are CTE qualified or working on their CTEs. Very proud to say at this moment, we have 5 facilitators who've just finished their CTEs. Another data point that's really good is the attendance of our Kings is much higher than the average attendance of just African-American males who are not in our program. And our behavior and suspension data also, since we've been existing over 7 years, has had an impact across the spectrum, across the district, and less than 40% less suspensions than before. The presence of not just our classes, but the events we provide, our man-up conferences, our community engagements, in which we open up to the community, teachers, family members, other student staff, has had an impact for our African American males.
You know, the equity thing, that's something I've been advocating for 58 years here in this place. And it's been something that we have never had for black people since Reconstruction time. And see, all that's necessary to do is to level the playing field. And we can do everything we have to do here, you know, but you got to get that school board and this system in line there, you know, to adhere to President Herbert Hoover's philosophy when he was asked his position on the education of Negro children at the time. He responded, through freedom and universal education, we provide the training for the runners. We give to them an equal start. Through government, we provide the referees of fairness in the game. That's what the Constitution provides for, you know. Give our, and start at kindergarten. You don't wait till you get to sixth grade. Give every kid the level playing field, and you'll see the results.
And what we're finding in our listening campaign is that across the pre-K to 12 spectrum, our students do not feel seen. Our students and families do not feel seen. They don't feel welcomed in our schools. And so this contributes to students feeling disconnected and disengaged. This really starts with our little ones in preschool and making sure that every family has access to quality preschool. It's about making sure that in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, our teachers are actually engaging our families, communicating with our families, that we have language support in our schools, right? Just to be able to communicate.
Students want to create a Raza Studies program so that students could actually, look deeper into the culture, and just ethnic studies program, period, and just learning about other cultures too, and make sure that the teachers who are teaching us are not white, because I know for a fact that when I was learning ethnic studies in my freshman year, it was taught by a white teacher, and I didn't really learn that much. It was just the basic that everybody knows: systematic oppression, institutional oppression, just the basics, and we just moved on. We didn't really learn a lot, and students really want to have a better curriculum for us to learn.
The listening campaign will probably continue over the next year as we really just continue to dive into these communities, understand the challenges, understand why our literacy rates are so low with our Polynesian, our Yemeni students, understanding, why and what our families need in terms of intergenerational trauma. How do we provide the kinds of resources to these students so that they can succeed and that they have what they need to be able to do well in school and graduate and be prepared for a career in college?
We decided from our listening campaign, we would take every workshop the girls said that they wanted, and we would make those the workshops. They wanted a workshop on finance. I had a young woman who had just graduated from Berkeley, and she had done an outstanding workshop. We had workshops on From Ghetto to Goddess. We had workshops on being an activist. We had workshops, 3 workshops for parents and educators. We had workshops around how girls communicate. We had workshops on hip hop and the impact of hip hop on the culture of girls. It was an amazing conference and overwhelming support because people do care about what's happening with Black girls in Oakland.
The Office of Equity evolved in Oakland Unified School District. We've looked to a few other districts. Not every district has an Office of Equity. We also realize how we've evolved to create our Office of Equity is a little different than some of the other districts like Portland or like Minneapolis, who had an equity policy. And so we do, as Oakland Unified School District, we have an equity policy now that we're writing the administrative regulations to the action steps that are going to allow us to manifest our vision of each and every child graduating college, career, and community ready. But it is nuanced in Oakland really through the groundbreaking and nationally acknowledged work of African American male achievement. And that is that we know that universal structures like a one-size-fits-all perpetuates racial inequity. And the fact that our Office of Equity is really nested in the lens and the understanding around racial equity and inequity, that we're actually creating these targeted strategies as a way not to marginalize or separate, but to accelerate understanding for our teachers and students that lift up the nuances, the collective genius of African American male and female students, of Latino and Latina students, of our Asian Pacific Islander students, and that that the idea of developing these nuanced strategies actually give the opportunity, inform the entire system on how the system needs to evolve in a way that accelerates the condition and the culture that leads to improved educational outcomes. And so I say this to say that the Office of Equity within Oakland Unified School District is bringing in a racial equity and healing frame that's going deep around the needs of Black, Brown, and API youth as a way to not only accelerate that academic performance for those marginalized groups, but also reimagine and evolve a system in service of what is once the minority, now the majority.